Hello and welcome to the special bonus episode of The Dairy Edge. Teagasc are running a weekly Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, which is also being made available as a podcast. On this week's webinar, Stuart Childs is joined by labour researcher Marion Beecher and dairy farmer Aidan Aherne to discuss how to improve work practices on dairy farms and some examples of efficient farm processes.
Okay, so good morning everyone and welcome to this morning's webinar. We're back on our labour series this week and we're joined by Marion as we were the last day, and we're also joined by Aidan Aherne. So Aidan is farming down between Cappoquin and Dungarvan, and he was part some of what you're going to see today will actually be kind of part of what was done at the dairy conference last year in terms of lean management and labour efficiency. But Marion, Abigail and Padraig O'Connor worked with Aidan about 15 or 18 months ago in order to try and streamline his milking process a little bit. So Marion's just going to go through a presentation first in terms of setting the scene in terms of what they found when they went to Aidan first, what they changed with him, and then how he benefited from the changes. And Aidan is going to come in and out as we go along maybe, and questions at the end for him as well in terms of the process. So thanks Aidan for coming on, and thanks Marion, and you can share your screen there. So Marion, to show the slides please.
Perfect. Thanks, Stuart. Thanks for having me. And again, thanks again to Aidan, I suppose, for being part of the whole process. And I suppose being, as you'll see later on, you're incredibly honest and open with the farm and gave us free run. So, just to start off, Stuart, I just thought it's important, I suppose, to give the context of, is that the title of the webinar is Working Efficiently and, what is achievable out on farm. So this study was done in 2015 by PhD student Justine Deming at the time, and it just shows here that in terms of the the number of cows on a farm, so less than farmers with less than 150 cows, 150 to 249 cows, and greater than 250 cows. And on the left hand side here, we've got the hours worked per year for everybody on the farm, and we can see here, as expected, as herd sizes increase, the total hours per year increases. And then if we look at on an hours per cow basis, so that we can compare across farms, we can see that, it has the opposite trend. So as cow numbers increase, we can see that there's a reduction down in the hours per cow. So that's expected. There's an economies of scale effect here. But I suppose what it doesn't show there, they're the averages for the year, but within each of those averages, there is extremes, and there is variation between every farmer, and these were selected as being efficient farmers starting off with, and even within each of those categories there was huge variation. So there's scope to be efficient regardless of herd size, and also there is still improvement regardless of where you're at as well. And then for the overall year, it was on average taking about 4,500 hours to operate the farm, and about 22 hours per cow per year overall.
And Marion, just to put it into context, then the standard working year, we'll say from an industrial point of view, is 2.2, I think, is it, or 2.3?
No, 2.2 would be what most farmers are working around a 48-hour, assuming a 48-hour week, and that's what most farmers are generally, the 2.2 is what come out from research that farmers are happy to work, basically.
Okay.
In terms of CSO data, in terms of what's an industrial worker, it's 1,800 hours.
Yes, okay, right.
Yeah. But look, that comes on to the next slide then. So we would have done this study with Conor Hogan last year in 2019. So looking at the January to June period. So, on seasonal calf-based systems, that's when the peak workload occurs. And what Conor found was that regardless of herd size, regardless of whether you're milking 50 cows or 240 cows, generally what you found in that period, the hours worked by the farmer was relatively stable. The proportion of what the farmer was contributing to the business was decreasing as the herd size is increasing. And that's because, I suppose, the farmers at the larger herd sizes were reliant more on contractors and hired staff to I suppose, make up that difference between the total hours required and what they were inputting. And equally then, as you said, regardless of what the herd size was, very little variation in terms of the hours worked per week by the farmers. So, 57 hours for farmers working with 50 to 90 cows and an average of 73 cows versus 61 hours per week, with someone who was in the 240 cows plus or an average of 304 cows. So that's telling us again that, regardless of farm size, farm hours are tending to stay consistent, and then to make up that difference between, what's required to manage the business is being filled by either family labour, family help, hired workers or contractors, or a mixture of all three. So that's what we found in both studies. Really was a similar picture. So then from those studies, the 4 key requirements in order to be, work efficiently are, having good facilities and technology. So, example of having good, adequate milking units, good work practices, once a day feeding your calves, or, I suppose practices that suit, the scale and system that you're at. Good time management, so completing, efficient completion of tasks and the use of the contractor. And then good work organization, so good routines. So then from that year-long study, we looked at the tasks as a proportion of the overall farm labour. So they're categorized into these tasks around here, and what we found is that milking is by far the most time-consuming task within the farm year. So it accounts for about 1/3 of the overall working year. So it's a really significant, I suppose, task, and totally understandable. You're doing it twice a day for 300 days of the year. Expected that it's pretty much the most time-consuming task. Next one then is to be aware of, I suppose, is cow care is at 17%, and also I suppose calf care here is coming out at 8% as a proportion of the overall year. But in that study that we did last year for that January to June period, calf care was coming out at about 14%. So what's that telling us is, it's a small proportion annually, but it's in that, January to June period is when the bulk of all that workload occurs.
It kind of makes sense, like that it dilutes out over the course of the year, so that it's half for the total year versus nearly the 14% is almost double it, like for that January-June period, like.
Exactly, it makes complete sense. So I suppose for me, like one of the take-home messages is, if you're unsure about, you're aware that, improving workload, or, you need to improve efficiency, or you want to make changes on the farm, but you're not really sure where to start, absolutely milking and calf care would be primarily the ones that I would be focusing in on first. And I suppose that's what we did with Aidan. So, as you said, about this time last year, actually, we went out to Aidan's farm, who's down in Cap in County Water, as I said, near Dungarvan, and is in partnership, with his wife Lisa and his father Thomas, and then Aidan, you've got Stephen working on the farm at the moment, and at that time you had 207 cows on 82 hectares, and a 16-unit herringbone, which meant that you're doing 13 rows of cows, morning and evening. So, and you have ACRs and manual drafting. So I think that kind of gives a picture, Aidan, of where you were at the time, is it?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose we kind of reached out to the Aidan's discussion group and asked anyone that was interested in coming on board and working with us on a mini project, I suppose, to see how lean and how to improve, I suppose, and the milking process would work. And Aidan got back to us, and the one comment that stuck out for me at the time, Aidan, was you said, you're doing 13 rows of cows in the milking parlour, it's not sustainable, but really before you want to go and either, go down the expensive route of either extending on units or actually maybe having to change the site of the parlour and building a new parlour, you wanted to make sure that you're doing everything as efficiently as possible. And, I suppose taking out the easy wins first and making sure that you aren't, inexpensive where you could make simple gains first. So that's the background to it, Stuart. And as I said, myself, Abigail Ryan and Paul O'Connor went out and worked with Aidan and looking at, I suppose we were focusing in on lean, but really anything to do with labour efficiency is almost lean, because you're just trying to make things run more efficiently or cut out any waste. So when we went to Aidan, we took a couple of measurements, and we looked at, time the first cluster went on, the last cluster went off. If there was any mastitis cows to be treated, which there wasn't at the time. We looked at counted the number of times that you actually exit the parlour pit during that milking, Aidan, and it was 14 times. And then overall milking duration was about an hour and a half. Average row time, I suppose, at the time reflected, it was coming to the ends of lactation. And I suppose the overall starting process for the milking and, herding, etc., was at 20 to 7 and finished at, 20 to 10. So it was a long, total time was taken, between herding, milking, wash up, and locking cows out afterwards, it was a full 3 hours. So it was a fairly, time consuming process, I suppose, at the time. And I suppose that based on that, then I suppose the first thing to say actually was, Aidan was you were doing an awful lot of things right. As Padraig kind of said when we went in, Padraig was like, right, we'll be able to, hopefully make recommendations, in terms of, switching your hands when you're milking the cluster, milking each row, so lessening the burden, I suppose, on your shoulders and arms, and talk about leaving the cows out before the last one was milked, etc. But you were doing all those things, so you're doing an awful lot of the milking process, I suppose, really well. But I suppose there were still little things that we felt that could be improved. So we came up with a number of recommendations, and I suppose then we went away and left. I suppose, and the key thing was, Aidan, you were involved in that process and coming up with the recommendations.
Yeah.
And you were kind of aware, I suppose, of most of those things yourself subconsciously, I think. It was only then when we said it that you were like, actually, yeah, that is right. You need to go and adjust, I suppose it gave you the spur on to maybe make those you needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to, I suppose, to get those things pointed out, and to go and do it. Somebody to say, right, this to confirm, actually, you actually need to go and do these few bits and pieces to get things running a bit smoother.
Yeah, so we left you with the list, as awful as it sounds. We came up with a few recommendations, left you with the list, and about 2 weeks later, then we called back, and we did the same process and the same measurement again to see, was there an effect of the changes that you implemented. And what we found, I suppose one of the biggest thing was about putting up that piece of stock board there on the picture here, just to, I suppose, make it easier to improve the cow flow, and to try and, I suppose, reduce down the number of times you had to come out of the pit, because that was killing time really, in terms of that. And then there was other little things in terms of, the visualization of putting the yellow tape on every fourth cluster to, to keep cognizant of when to, spray cows and do things in batches. And the other one was in terms of 5S, whereas putting in just a piece of stock board again, so that you had all your items on the pit, in the pit, rather than on the the windows behind you where you had it previously. Again, I'll have a better picture of that later on.
So I suppose, Marion, just before you might go back there, just to explain the reason for the stock board on the gate, maybe.
Yeah.
Just clarify for people as to why, because I know the reason, and you know the reason, just in case people aren't clear as to what that did, like, or what was the problem there. Like you said, Aidan had to come out of the pit. Why was he having to come out of the pit? Like.
Yeah. So sorry. Yeah, it's a good point. So you were coming out of the pit, as I said, 14 times, and the majority of times was literally just to move cows up. That they were all kind of congregating around this area here, and not funneling into the parlour, and part of the reason was because that gate was there and it was open, so as soon as cows come out and exit the parlour, they're coming down this road here. So the first row might go in all right, and the second row might go in all right, but anyone rows after that, they were seeing these cows that are coming out, particularly if they're slow moving, coming out and not exiting, going out straight to grass. They were tending to the cows exiting the parlour were tending to congregate inside there. So the ones in the collecting area were tending to hang around here as well, and watching those ones and not actually going in. So Aidan was having to come out and be operate as a human backing gator almost, and herd them in, like. So actually, just by simply putting up that bit of stock board there, it just meant that the cows in the collecting yard couldn't see the ones that were exiting out of the pit afterwards.
They felt they had to follow him through the parlour to get out, like.
And on that, like, I've really seen the benefit of that this year. Like, we didn't have a huge amount of time last year because it was the end of October. I've really seen the benefit of that this year, and actually the cows and the heifers this year actually go in easier on that side than they do on the left hand side, where you think there's a straight wall going up there that did easier. So that stockboard has such a simple thing has made a huge difference to the milking process. And on the other point, it was probably one of the biggest things that surprised me was how many times I came out of the pit in that first milk. I didn't realize. I think he asked me, I thought it said maybe 5 or 6 times at the most, and it was 14 or 15 times, like, so you when you get into doing something by habit, you actually don't realize how often you do things that are using up time.
Marion, there's just a question there. Familiarity breeds contempt, as they say. What is it, 5S? Will you explain 5S?
Yeah. So that'll come up. I'll explain that in the next few slides there. But it's basically a technique to make sure that everything has a place for everything and everything in its place. But yeah, I'll explain that in about 2 or 3 slides time. So don't worry, it's coming up.
Okay.
So then the other thing, Aidan, that you did since last year is actually in terms of the visualization. So this is, I suppose, visualization is all about making sure that things are easy to see. And I suppose we're used to it in every day, and farmers are used to it every day in terms of, either using freeze brands, tags, heat detection, tail paints, marking cows for antibiotic milk. It's used to us. We're so used to it on farms as it is, and lean is all about I suppose increasing that visualization and increasing those things to make everything easier. So you're taking things out of your head and putting them, down so other people can see them. So you said that these are your descaling drums, and these are the days you use the descaler. And then you just very simply write it on the barrel. And then you write as well on every time you start a new barrel. So then you know roughly when you need to order the next one. Is that right, Aidan?
Yeah, that's right. It's just simplifying, making it, as you said, visual, that it's there. It might seem right, there's no need to do it, but it actually makes it so much easier, especially if you've staff or people coming in and out, like, and putting the date on the barrel. It just makes it, you're aware then that, right, we could be coming. You have an idea, say a barrel will last a month, 2 months, 3 months. You say, right, I better be watching out when that'll be coming. So you're not stuck then, barrel is after running out. You could be waiting 2 or 3 days for it to be dropped off. So you can have continuation, and it's very simple thing to do for that. And I suppose with the use of non-chlorine, maybe our wash system has gotten a little bit more complicated. So that means, we're doing a double wash with D-scale. We were in a high limestone area here, so we do a double wash with D-scale. So it should, just because the process has changed a bit, it's easy to put that on the barrel. Very easy for anybody to see that you use the D-scale on a Saturday and a Wednesday morning.
Marion, actually, I've seen it. I can't describe it fully now because I haven't seen it in the flesh, but I've seen a photograph of it where a guy has a piece of styrofoam sitting in the barrel with marks on it for when you need to order and when it's empty, basically, as well. So it's floating on the solution in the barrel, and it's dropping down as the solution drops in the barrel as well. So that's another, I think that's a very good, combining the two is a good thing, actually, because there's a certain element of, sometimes people can switch a chemical and you might end up going through an awful lot more than they actually anticipate. And if you've the date written on when you did start using it, it could kind of flag something for you that maybe you're overusing something, or maybe not using enough, maybe in another case, like.
Yeah, exactly.
For the teat tip, it works really well, and that you can monitor through every barrel how much you're using. So it works out very easy on teat tip. It's really good one for that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all about those little tips, just basically to make things easier. And they're things that might necessarily speed up a job, but it means that it makes things easier for other people coming in, or for yourself if you're just, it takes things out of your head and you can concentrate then on other jobs, such as, picking up cows at mastitis, etc., or, things that are more important, I suppose. So I said, what is 5S? So 5S is a process for, organising, cleaning and maintaining a workplace. So what it does is it creates a safe, standard, efficient and effective workplace. And then the 5S stand for these 5 steps over here. So you sort everything out. So basically, would say what we did with Aidan was we took out everything from his dairy or part of the dairy, and we took everything out, we cleaned it, we put stuff in order. So we put everything that was needed to be put back into the dairy, put it back in there, and gave everything a place, and we labeled things. Shine refers to just basically keeping on top of that, and making sure that it's always kept clean and kept tidy and kept on top of things. Standardize then refers to making sure that everybody knows where everything is and where what the process is if things aren't put back into their place, or how to manage the area. And then sustain then is all about ensuring that none of these areas fall down, and that you don't revert back to type, as you said, Stuart, and just you don't refer back to your old habits of everything being just thrown in there. So these are just some examples. Some of them from the Dairy Lean farm, some of them from I think a farm possibly over in New Zealand or the UK, about the different areas of where this can work. So here you can see, for the fence reels and the pigtail posts, they're all lined up in an area. So again, very clear to see if the thing's been moved out. This farmer here has just color coded a lot of the items, so he's color coded these items. So basically, if a red handle thing is put back somewhere differently, where exactly where to put it. Again, tidying up the tool shed. These two, the right and left, are the in the calf shed, about having all your taggers, sprays, tags, calendars, everything that you need in the calving shed in one place. And then this one is like the shadow board that Aidan had in his farm, of for the milking parlour, having your ointment, your markers, paint, tail marker, scissors, everything that you need, CMT paddle, everything you need is located within the parlour pit. So you're not having to go out and go get ointment. You're not having to go back out again and get, tail paint. Everything is there. So you're reducing down the number of steps that you're having to do to get out, or reducing the effort that you need in there. So again, as I said, what we did with Aidan was, you're very honest, you left everything as is for us when we came in, and this was one half of the dairy, of the compressor house, sorry, and as you said, you kept everything in there. There was a lot of rubbish and stuff like that. So what you did was you took everything from this half of the compressor house out, and you sorted through it, and you dumped the rubbish, you moved stuff out that wasn't related to that wasn't needed in the parlour, and moved them elsewhere, and then you tidied things up so that it ended up like this. And you had a shelf up here, and if we look at the shelf in more detail, this is what it looked like. So you had a store for your tail paint, your sharps, your calf bottle, and your gloves. And again, it's just simply labeling, so it's very clear then, if you're going low on tail paint because there'll be one left, or if the sharps box has been moved to somewhere else, it's not there. It's very easy to see, and it's easy for someone to put it back. And again, it's just easier for giving instructions if you're going. So imagine, beforehand asking someone to go up and get the tail paint. In this picture, it's a lot harder to find, whereas if you go up and ask them again, you're losing no time, I suppose, finding things.
Absolutely, yeah, and just the labeling is huge. Like it makes it so much easier to find a place for everything and put them back in place, and that has led on to, when you see how effective labeling is, you automatically tend to do it in other areas. Then it follows on. You say, right, that works. Just do it, in different calf sheds or whatever else,
Exactly. Again, it just makes things very simple and very clear, and then it means that you've got a dedicated space for everything, so everything fits in well. And then, as I said, this was in the dairy, and this was again the before picture. So you had your bulk tank, and you had this calf pump which you're holding your apron on. There was a step ladder. There was hoses all the way around, and I suppose that was the first thing we noticed when we went in, is that and you did it without even realizing. I think you just were so automatic. You just went into the parlour or into the compressor house. got your stuff there, came back out and was either going around this or just, avoiding it. You hadn't realised that it was either a trip hazard or in the way potentially. So literally, we just literally took it out. You removed the step ladder, tidied up the hoses, and actually by cleaning up the compressor house earlier, you actually were able to fit it in. So you were able to, it was still located there for when you needed it, but it was just in a tidier place. Again, this is the 5S. So again, this window was at the front of the parlour, and you had all your stuff up on top of the windowsill. Your paints and your CMT paddle and stuff like that. And you said yourself you're quite happy with where it was, and you actually didn't realise what a difference of even just bringing those small few things down into the parlour. Again, simply just putting up a bit of stock board, a few clips just to hold things up so that everything is there in the one place. And again, just reducing down the number of times you have to leave the pit. And then the other thing we did was we worked on, developing out a standard operating procedure, and just, again, the idea of labeling things and just writing things up, what our switch is for. Very obvious to you. You're so used to it, it's automatic to you, but I suppose anyone that's, from farm relief or family members who are not as familiar with what switches are what for what, just writing them up on them and above them makes things so much easier. So that was the standard operating procedure, and then you just, again, put it up at the point of use where it is. So again, anyone can come in and just refer back to that really simply. And I think you were saying earlier on as well, you were saying to us that you've taken that a step further and you've done up ones for the calf rearing process, and that you put it on the WhatsApp group, is it?
Yeah, we made up an SOP for the calves, for sick calves. It was something we did within our discussion group as well, and so I put some of the information we had on the WhatsApp group with the lads who are working us, and just how much milk replacer to feed, what happens if you have a sick calf, when to transition them, all the different stuff for and it worked really well. Except for the fact that if you change your phone, you lose all your WhatsApp stuff. So we will put all of that on a whiteboard. I thought it was really good because everybody had it in your hand. But, by going through the process, you learn something, right? Actually, it's better off we can maintain it. We can keep it for next year if we put it on a board and leave it in the calf house or wherever the most suitable place is, So again, we thought we were doing something really well, and it did, and it worked really well. But as you find out, there's something that, I suppose, messes it up a little bit, so you develop it a little bit further. And I think that's part of the whole process. There's always tweaking to it, to everything you do in it.
That's exactly it. Lean is a continuous process, and labor efficiency and improving efficiency is a continuous process. You're continually learning, continually modifying, and continually improving. And I think what you said there is ideal. Put it in the calf shed, even just take a picture of it there, and then you can share that picture on WhatsApp. Is probably the simple solution to that. But as you said, look, anyone who doesn't learn from the mistakes is just foolish. So everyone makes mistakes, and it's not a mistake if you learn from it. So I think that's the key, and that's part of lean. That's part of labor efficiency. It's part of everything I suppose we do.
Yeah, and I think it makes you more buy into it if you learn from something that you've done wrong, that you can say, all right, I can adapt the process to make it even better, and it gives you actually more buy into the whole lean and 5S process. When you see you do something, you think you do it right, and then you find, oh, we can tweak that and make it a bit better. It gives you a hell of a lot more buy into it, rather than just following a book or following something, say, like what she had already done for me. When you do a process yourself and you tweak it, there's way more buy-in then.
That's it exactly. There's learning from doing it yourself, exactly. So then, as they said, those were the changes you made. So then back on that second day, we did the same measurements again, and so we found that instead of exiting the pit 14 times, you just exited 6 times. So you reduced it significantly, and then I suppose overall, you're saved 20 minutes in that milking. Okay, so that's 20 minutes within that milking. Whether or not it'll be 20 minutes every milking is debatable. But for me, it's still the fact that starting off, you were still operating to an extremely high level, and and you still manage to make a savings of 20 minutes per milk, or in that milking, is a huge time saver. And even if it was only 10 minutes for every milking for 300 days of the year, it's a really significant amount of time. And I think it just shows, for me, absolutely all those little things make a huge difference. And I suppose that is the whole idea of lean and efficiency. It saves time. You're doing efficient practices. It's about improving conditions. So, that means get more job satisfaction. It's more enjoyable. You improve safety, and you're overall going to increase your profitability because there's going to be less waste. So all of those are the benefits of lean. And I think this example just absolutely highlights all of those things exactly. And without incurring massive costs, I think, all those changes that you made were very minimal costs, but can have huge benefits. So then, as I said, overall, Aidan, when we went out there, starting off, absolutely an excellent routine. There was already low wastage, and you're already producing a really high quality product. And if you save 20 minutes per milking, that would be 40 minutes per day. So that was absolutely, I suppose, the learning for me, that even within a highly efficient routine, that there's still room for improvement. And I suppose, Aidan, comments on the right, on this side were more, the bullet points were, I suppose, what you found. So I'm going to let you talk about your experience, about how you found it, and I suppose what you learned and would take on board from it afterwards.
Yeah, I suppose if we start with the perception versus reality, by measuring and you timed a lot of the stuff we were doing, I found that some things that I was doing, say washing down the whole where the cows walk out and all that, I assumed it took me longer than that it actually did take. So it actually took some of the chore out of that job and say, right, that's not taking that long, so I don't mind doing it. And even say then on the getting in and out of the parlour, now we routine, we try, the target is to try and not have to get out of the pit while you're milking. And that's a target we set all the time. Obviously it doesn't always work, but that's your target, and your goal is something to measure against and do it and keep getting that time down. I suppose the lean, the fact that, and I said at the time, I wouldn't be the most tidiest person in the world. It's not my personality type, but this gives you a structure to do it, and makes it easier for me to tidy up and keep it clean. And so I found for my Board B inspection this year, it was very easy, right, it wasn't as good as, it wasn't as tidy at the time before the thing as what the picture is there, but we brought it back to that very easily. And it's about maintaining it and keeping the structure. If you go back to the lean idea, you should be maintaining that on a say a weekly or monthly or whatever basis. So it was very easy to bring it to the level it needed to be for my Board B or whatever. So when you have the labels and the process, it makes the job a way shorter time. So maybe a half an hour inside the plant room had it sorted, rather than a day, say, would have been the previous Board B inspection I had. And yeah, the walk before you run, you start in a small area, and as I was saying earlier, the things naturally develop. We developed it on for calves and for different things. So once you get confidence of doing it in one area, you will bring it in. And we've still a lot to do. I wouldn't say, I probably would have thought at the end of last year I would have more done this year, but between everything this year and that, it's something, but you're always conscious of it. And that's what I think, that we've probably made small improvements on everything that I mightn't have even have known. And I think some of the things we did, I had a student for a month from Kildalton there in October, and just with COVID and stuff, but we put in a system in the tractor, because a couple of people might be going into tractor where we'd hand sanitizer, wipes to wash the steering wheel, wash the anything that you touch. And that would have been something that we learned from lean, how that process of making sure that everything was clean and tidy, and that, and I wouldn't have known how to do that before the lean process. And it was easy to come up with a process then after going through that. And yeah, the cleaning is addictive. It is, people who are good at it know it is addictive, and people that are bad at it find that it's hard to get started, but once you get started, you're going, you know. So I think there's definitely a lot to learn in the process. And as a food product, we have to be wary of everything we're doing and portray a good, clean environment, you know, for both as a food product, but also for people coming in and working, like as what you were talking about 2 weeks ago, making the farm an attractive place for people to work. You know, I think that's very important.
Very good. So, Aidan, just out of interest, from your own perspective, then, what did you feel was the big change in terms of the time saving? Because, like, when Marion showed, when I saw the slides there the other day, like, your row time was extremely quick as it was, like. So, like, there wasn't a huge amount coming out of the pit. Obviously, was one of the main things.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of things. I think by marking the every 4 cluster made a big difference in that we routinely then went back and sprayed after the 4 clusters. So that speeded up that. Marking the slow cows had a big drum, and again we marked a couple of them this year. You have the clusters on them quickly, and like if a slow cow doesn't get caught, you could lose very easily with a not slow cow. Like getting in and out of the parlour would definitely add a bit, and having to say all the tapes now would, if we have a mastitis cow, it's part of the process that you bring the tube in with you before you start milking, so you have it left up on the board at the front, so that you're not going out to the parlour to go get a tube, you know, when you're getting, or when you're tubing her, like, you know, and that, so that it speeds up all those little things, like, you know, and like, you know, 40 minutes it might be huge, but it makes a big difference when you're on the length of time it takes to milk our cows, when you're pushing it out at 13, like we milked 13 and a half, we milked 216 this year, so we milked a bit extra. So when you're pushing it, all those little bits make a difference, like, you know, and it means people don't get fed up with milking, which is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's just interesting because, like, as Marion said, the efficiency of your raw time was very significant there, and you still actually were able to save time again then on top of that. Like, so it's just identifying that routine, or stepping back and looking in at your routine. And as you said, you got the benefit of Marion and Abigail and Padraig watching you to do that for you. But you think that everybody should be, or you've developed the skill yourself now that you can kind of take a step back and look at what you're doing, to see, is there a better way of doing it? And you said earlier as well that, like, it's in your head now all the time to try and, I suppose, think through what you're doing in a process type way. Like, so a lot of the things you were doing anyway, but it's just actually thinking about it before you go and doing the job, or looking at the job that you're doing and seeing, can we tweak this somewhere, like.
Yeah, and it's structuralizing what you actually automatically think anyway, like, you know, and that makes it a lot easier to pass it on to staff and stuff as well. And like, I think we were lucky in some ways too, Marion, that Stephen had just started at the time, so he was able to break down the milking processes very easily, whereas I would have probably skipped the pile of them. Whereas Stephen had just started it, I think 2 weeks before that, so that was a big help in that we're able to break down all the different the processes in the milking and setting up of the parlour and stuff like that, because it's very easy to skip a process that you automatically think you're doing, like, you know. So that helped, and like, I suppose reaffirming it again, the student I had in for the month of October, going through the processes and stuff like that, you reaffirm, you rethink what you're doing, and to explain it. And it's always good to be able to explain a simple thing to another person, like, you know, that really gets you to know, do you know your own process? And look, like, we don't do ever, like, we don't draw, unless we have a mastitis issue, we wouldn't draw the cows and stuff like that, and it does speed up times. Maybe if we were milking at 8 rows, we might, but we don't have somatic cell issues, so it's something I don't need to do. But if we had to do it, that would slow things down a lot further, like, you know. But there's ways and means around, like, look, they do in lots of people would maybe draw 2 quarters each milking, do back in the morning, eat front in the evening. That can every process can be speeded up, like, you know, without rushing. You know, I think that's the thing. You speed up without rushing,
and without compromising on product quality. As you said, you can speed. You know, you could absolutely race through cows. But you'll see issues in terms of cell count and TBCs. I think that was, you hit the nail on the head there, Aidan. You know, you're still getting through the cows and doing a really good row time, but your cell count was, you know, excellent the 2 days you went down there. You know, solids were very good as well, so you weren't compromising on quality. And in terms, I remember going through the standard operating, you know, the standard operating procedure on the day, and as you said, you know, you go through every step, and then you might say, oh, actually, I forgot to do a couple of steps back there, you know, back 2 or 3 steps. And I think that was for me, when we were to write it down, it was the key thing. And I was like, I think it came obvious to you then, like, geez, if I was explaining this to, you know, to Stephen or to whoever was coming in, or someone from the farm relief, it's very hard to expect people, for you to explain it in keeping everything in absolute sequence, and then for people to remember it in absolute sequence as well. And I just see one of the comments there, Stuart, coming in, is that, you know, about the idea of making YouTube videos or a video of the standard operating procedure, which I think, you know, is a brilliant idea. But I think, you know, we have to be aware, and Oleg would have said it in the webinar 2 weeks ago, about people learn differently and people remember things differently, whether it's visual, audio, or kind of doing it by hands-on. So absolutely, the more we can tick off those in terms of how we explain things, the more likelihood of people remembering things and implementing them. So absolutely, videos are really good, but I think you still can't, I suppose, you know, underestimate the power of actually having them written down as well. Because I would think, if you're in the milking parlour and you've only got a video of the standard operating procedure of milking, and you've got gloves on, you're trying to get your phone out, you're trying to then go back to the WhatsApp message where you sent them the video, trying to find the exact piece, you know, of that video where you're trying to find, you know, what to do, you know, you're probably not going to do it, or it's probably going to be easy to ring up the farmer. Whereas at least if you've done the video and they've watched it beforehand, they've got an idea. But also then, if you have the written ones up in the dairy, as you have, Aidan, you can just go very quickly up and just check yourself without having that hassle. So
yeah, I think the video would work. Say if you're doing it yourself, do the video and you can find the steps to write down yourself. I think it might, if you were trying to do it yourself, you'd be able to see each of the steps you go through. And also, like, say if you had somebody in milking and you had to hold a cow for milking, if you have to go through a whole video to try and get to that point, it'll take longer than just looking at the visual thing. That step is actually there. Oh, how do I hold the milk? Put down that switch or pull that lever or whatever. Bang it, and you have it straight away. So I think it's a combination of both. Every aid can be a help.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Aidan. I was just going to make it there as well about, actually, if people want to do this process, you should nearly record yourself doing it, or at the very minimum, you cannot do this sitting at your kitchen table. You have to be in the dairy and in the milking parlour, because you'll have to go into the dairy to do something, you have to come out then to flick something else, you might have to go back to the dairy then to get set up. You record that process, and you won't do this in one sitting either. Like, in order to develop a standard operating procedure, which sounds technical, but like in reality it's just a how-to list, really, isn't it? To do that right, it could take a couple of cracks at it. And I would have seen from one of the Dairy Gold Monitor farms that's focusing on lean, Sean Moher, like Sean had originally kind of done out the SOP with just verbally, we'll say, so it was written out, but it was all words, and now he's added the visualization, so he has the pictures of the different aspects for it, because the switch to the left, which way you're looking at the switch, like, so you know, it has to be this way or it has to be that way. So I think the visualization is something that again, talking to one of the other guys on the Dairy Gold program there recently, he said 2 years ago he had a place for everything and everything in its place, Marion, as we always talk about, but yet stuff seemed to drift from one place to another. So last year he color coded it, like you showed in the images that you showed there, and he said it really helped. So obviously people were finding that they had the red handled vice grip or the red taped vice grip in their hand. Oh, that's supposed to be below next in the tool shed, or that's after coming from the dairy, so they were putting it back where they were putting it back, or where it should be put back to. Whereas even though he had the stuff in the places beforehand, it wasn't actually returning to where it should be. Like, so it's just that's a big thing. Like, and like I think it's important to think like what you said about the visualization. We're doing an awful lot of it as dairy farmers already, but we just have to think that little bit extra. That we are like we're doing a lot of lean things already, but it's just the little steps that can make a big difference, really. Like,
yeah, like absolutely every dairy farmer in the country, probably every farmer in the country is using lean without realizing it. And I think that's, lean is a term, but it's something that we're doing in our everyday life. And I think what you and Aidan kind of mentioned earlier, it's about being conscious of what you're doing. So a lot of times, because it's routine, we're so used to doing it, we do things unconsciously. Whereas, this is all about a process about making that conscious effort to realize what you're doing. And then there's two things in terms of the standard operating procedures. As you said, Stuart, they're simply just a set of instructions. That's all they are. One of the farmers that I was involved in one of the studies that we were doing, he said he developed out standard operating procedure, and he said took the time and actually handed it to his babysitter who knows nothing about farming, said for the milking process, can you go and follow that, and could you start up the milking parlour? So I think that was just a brilliant, he knew then if she could follow that, that set of instructions, anyone could do it. So that was a really, really good test. Okay, everyone mightn't be able to do that, but it's just, get someone who's not as familiar with the process as you were, just to test out the instructions to make sure everything is logical. And then the second thing is that, Padraig O'Connor and Martina Gormley have done, a huge amount of effort in terms of pulling together various number of standard operating procedures, and they're available on the Teagasc website. So if you go onto the Teagasc website and even just search for top 10 dairy SOPs, there's about 10 dairy SOPs there that you can download and edit. So absolutely, they're starting points. They're not, because every process on every farm will be different, but they will be they're a good guide, I suppose, to get you started on developing your own ones for your farm. They're a good template.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, I think you always copy examples of what other people are doing. Like, it saves you a lot of why reinvent the wheel when it's there already. So yeah, as much as possible, copy what if somebody else has done it, copy it and adjust it to your own situation.
Yeah, and even Marion, I suppose Francis Quigley did some stuff there when COVID hit as well about the different makes of machines. So he linked up with all the suppliers of milking machines and put the starting instructions for most of the machines that they have, because obviously, like we would have said with Nullig 2 weeks ago as well, like Aidan's machine could be very different to your machine to my machine. So even though they might be all made by the same company, there can be just little things in each of them. So I suppose I think we'll wrap it up with that. Thanks a million, Aidan. I suppose there's just one question came in there in relation to what are sharps. I suppose I presume that you're just using that for needles.
Needles, yeah.
For to satisfy for board beer.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, very good. So just to, I suppose, highlight a few things that are coming up. So next week our dairy conference is on. Again, it's on Zoom. So we've 3 days on Zoom for you next week at 10 o'clock if you can afford the time. Hopefully, if you've your SOPs and stuff done between here and then, you'll be able to afford the time. So next week, Tuesday, is the start of the dairy conference, and the first session is about making better use of fertilizer nitrogen. So that's going to be on from 10 o'clock to about 11, and we're going to be joined by Stan Lawler, who's taking up a role within Teagasc on next Monday. He's going to be chairing the session, and Lauren Chalou, Elodie Roel, and Owen Fenton from Johnstown Castle are going to be talking about how we can looking at the research, can we actually make better use of fertilizer nitrogen into the future? So we're going to be challenged to do that as part of renewing a derogation for 2022. So the lads are going to talk about the scope for us to actually do that. And then that evening, I suppose, so from 10 to 11 is the webinar as such, and then from 7 p.m. to about 7:30, there's the Dairy Age podcast live with Emma Louise. She's going to be talking to Mike Egan in relation to clover, and she's also going to be joined by John McNamara. So John was Grassland Farmer of the Year 2 years ago, and John has incorporated a lot of clover onto his farm in the last couple of years now. So just to highlight how he's finding that and how he's doing it. Then on Wednesday, we're going to be talking about improving sustainability, which is obviously everywhere at the moment and will be for time to come, obviously, as well. So through improving farm efficiencies. So thankfully, we've been very fortunate that a lot of the things that we've been pushing with you down through the years are actually positive in terms of sustainability. But we're going to talk to John Roach from New Zealand, Brendan Horn and Brian Rush from the IFA, and also a dairy farmer himself, are going to be talking to Karina Pierce on Wednesday from 10 till 11. And again, then in the evening, Patrick Going and Derek Lean from just outside of Aircourt in County Galway will be talking to Emma Louise for a half an hour from 7 p.m. to 7:30. So we hope that you can join us for that. And then again, we'll be back next week. Next week, I'm going to be joined by John Paul Murphy, the farm manager in Moore Park, who's going to be talking about body condition score. And Joe Patton is going to join me again to talk to us in relation to maybe what we can do with those cows that may be a little bit lacking in condition at this stage. It's getting a bit late, so there might be some strategies need to be employed. So we look forward to talking to you next week. You have to register for the dairy conference, obviously, so just Google Teagasc Dairy Conference if you haven't gotten some notification already through text messages or whatever, or on Twitter, and register for that. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, Marion, and thanks very much, Aidan, for joining us. And then we'll have Nullig and Marion back again in 2 weeks' time to talk about making better use of your time and people that may be working for you, their time as well. So thanks very much, everyone. Take care and stay safe.
That's all for this week's Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, and don't forget to look out for more bonus episodes each week. I'll be back with our usual Dairy Edge interview on Monday, so do listen in then. I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and thanks for listening.